Wow. So a lot of stuff to get to today here. As the war in Ukraine continues on, they've actually updated the map and given these red zones represent the places that the Russians have successfully occupied. I want to talk about, in this video, Vladimir Putin. Why does he really want Ukraine? I've thought about it. I've slept on it. And I have a, specific theory on why I think he wants Ukraine and what he plans on doing with Ukraine. But let's quickly update you guys. You guys can see the Russian advance has slowed down. Now, my speculation is the Russians didn't anticipate this many Ukrainian civilians fighting for their country. He thought he'd probably have more support in Ukraine than he's getting. Not like you'd get a ton of support invading another neighboring country. I mean, although Hitler did get a ton of support in Czechoslovakia, you see this. But either way, the Russians vastly underestimated the Ukrainian citizens' will and fight for freedom. And I think it was, Putin invading originally. Everyone kept saying this is a full-fledged invasion. It was nothing close to that. The original goal for Putin was to get Kiev, set up a puppet government as fast as possible, and that would be that, and they would have extremely low number of losses. There are reports that they've lost over 4,000 men. All of it's unconfirmed. I'll throw the stats up right here to show you just how many unconfirmed losses they have according to the Ukrainian military. But yeah, I just think this was a situation where Putin's strategy was he thought the Ukraine were a bit of a rollover. He wasn't going to send his full team, his full guys in there. This was not some sort of full-fledged Operation Barbarossa type invasion into Ukraine. He wanted to do it swift, quickly, and efficiently, and that hasn't happened. So he's told his guys to hang tight, and he's sending more reinforcements. And at this point, if you're Putin, you have to capture Kiev. You have to. There is simply not an option. The entire world is against you. If you're going to tuck and run at this point, you would look like the biggest fool on the earth, and you're also facing massive sanctions. So you need to take Ukraine as kind of a leverage lateral move, and that gets me to my overall point. Why does Vladimir Putin want Ukraine so bad? And people say he wants more power in the West, things like that. That's really simplifying it. I'm just going to talk on a very specific, detailed level my opinion on why Vladimir Putin wants Ukraine, and this whole thing goes back to the United States involvement in Europe and the United States involvement specifically in NATO. NATO has made it, especially in the 21st century, so many of these Western European countries are virtually untouchable due to this alliance they've created with the #1 military power in the world. And Russia has extremely little influence on Western Europe at this point. So Putin says, all right, you look at Ukraine, a country that's not in NATO. They're obviously not going to invade a NATO country at this point, or you would hope not. You invade Ukraine strategically, you quickly take Ukraine, and now you use Ukraine as kind of a bargaining chip and say, we've captured Ukraine, we have these people under our occupation. If you want to save the Ukrainian people, NATO, the United States must leave NATO, or something of that effect. The Russians cannot stand that the United States is in NATO. Now, there will be a European Union. All of these European countries in Western Europe, based on how everything sets up politically, that's inevitable. Germany, the UK, France, they're all going to have an agreement. All right, that's just how it's set up. Now, obviously, it would be a lot more beneficial to Russia if those countries didn't like each other. But, right now they're going to have an agreement. They're landlocked. Russia needs some sort of bargaining chip, and I think they want Ukraine as that bargaining chip. They want to hold those people hostage, and they want to create this sort of dissension among NATO members. Now, one of the weird things about it is you would think, and you would predict that if you were Putin, that if you would invade the Ukraine, NATO would only be stronger together, which is exactly what's happened. It's not like Russia's going to invade Ukraine and then NATO is going to, not be together. Obviously, now they're going to be even more heightened. And then the whole idea, should NATO get involved in this? It's not worth it. I think I'm about 99.9% sure Vladimir Putin, and I think the American intelligence agency is telling Biden this, All the European intelligence agencies are telling their leaders they're probably about 99.9% sure if NATO intervened and saved the Ukraine, I don't think Biden would, or excuse me, I don't think Putin would have any, be able to do anything about it. There is that 1% chance, though. He's threatening nukes. If NATO gets involved, he's going to nuke, especially the Western Europe countries. Biden is really just going with what Europe wants, and realistically, with where America is positioned at in the world, that's kind of all you can do. America is not landlocked with Russia. Okay, whatever happens in Ukraine is going to significantly impact Western Europe more than it is going to impact America. It'll impact everywhere. One country taking over another country, yes, that's going to impact everyone. And that's why you're seeing these massive sanctions on Russia and this total sort of anti-Russia propaganda via social media and things like that, because everyone's saying this is terrible, this is bad. But this will affect the European countries a lot more because they are landlocked with Russia, as opposed to America separated significantly from Russia just in the world view. So Putin is using nukes as leverage, saying, listen, if NATO gets involved, everyone, I think, most people think he's bluffing. 99% chance, sure, but there is that 1% chance. That's the thing with nukes. You can use them to your advantage. It's unbelievable. But I think Putin wants Ukraine as a way to negotiate and be like, you want to save the Ukrainian people? We have Ukraine. You want to save these people? You want us to leave Ukraine? NATO needs to dissolve, or there's going to be some sort of deal set in place that will significantly weaken NATO if you want to save the Ukrainian people. That's my opinion. I think they went in pretty half-assed. They thought they were going to take Ukraine. They probably thought they were going to get a little support in the Ukraine when they invaded it from the Ukrainian people, but that has not happened. They vastly underestimated the amount of civilians that were actually going to fight for Ukraine and not flee. I'm sure they thought most would flee. You start bombing places, people get scared. You see it on social media. They thought most of them would probably flee west to Poland, and that some of them have, but a lot of people are staying back, and Putin sends in, not his full force of people, and this is what happened. Russia really has no point, has no choice. They're going to have to capture the capital. They're going to have to. No matter what now, the Ukraine is doing a great job. They're fighting off these forces, but Russia is going to end up just due to simply outnumbering them. It's all about manpower. We saw Nazi Germany against the Soviet Union. The Nazis were the more skilled army. It didn't matter because Russia kept throwing soldiers, literally throwing waves of soldiers, as well as the Stalingrad, things like that. But it was just the overwhelming force the USSR had against Nazi Germany enabled them to defeat it. So they will take the capital. They have to kind of at this point, if they tucked and run, Putin would be seen as a laughingstock. Russia would be facing massive sanctions. They would have losses. They would go nowhere. They have to complete this campaign in the Ukraine and take the capital and set up a puppet government. At the minimal point, use Ukraine as a bargaining chip once you have it. Right, that's, I think, Putin's main goal. All right, guys, let's get to some of these tweets. This broke Sunday morning. Putin ordered Russian nuclear deterrent forces on high alert amid tensions with the West over Ukraine. Vast majority of people believe, including myself, that's a complete bluff, and that is just meant to scare the West from not interfering with this war with the Ukraine. We know he said right when they invaded Ukraine that any NATO group that tries to intervene will be met with nuclear firepower, and now he puts his nuclear division on high alert, kind of as another bluff. But again, it's that 99% chance it's a bluff. Do you feel comfortable? Is saving Ukraine worth going potentially into World War III? That's the question a lot of politicians are facing, a lot of governments in Western Europe right now are facing, and they have said, and NATO has said, no. It's simply not worth it, even if it's just a 1% chance right now. This also broke yesterday. Ukrainian delegation set for peace talks with Russian delegates. That just happened, and apparently they're meeting again, but there will be no resolution. It is, at this point, abundantly clear that the Ukraine will not settle for, any sort of agreement where Russia's going to want the capital, and it's just not going to happen. These peace talks, they're going to be like, listen, we'll take the capital, we'll take the eastern Ukraine. The Ukrainian people have made it clear that's not going to happen. These talks are going to go nowhere. Again, it just broke before I started this video that they met and they're going to meet again. But I would be shocked if any of those peace talks went anywhere. I think it's more Russian propaganda trying to act like, oh, we're being peaceful. That's more what it is. As bad as what Ukraine is going through right now is, they've never had to experience what the American people experienced on January 6th. Obviously, a bit of sarcasm there. That's based off of the media completely overreacting to what happened on January 6th. Biden is hosting a meeting on Ukraine today with the leaders of NATO, the European Union, the UK, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Japan, and Romania. Obviously, very important that we have communication. The United States has communication with these Western allies. So these people should be meeting daily. I'm sure their delegates do, but still, that is good. And you know what? You always want to discuss kind of your plans moving forward. Obviously, no chance NATO is going to get involved in this Russian-Ukraine conflict unless it turned nuclear. We know that. So this was something that was really interesting that was actually trending in the political section of Twitter. Abolish NATO. A lot of people thought this was some creation of Russian bots, this whole hashtag abolish NATO. Who knows? Mark Zuckerberg, I made a new Instagram filter so you can show your support for Ukraine. Elon Musk, I gave Ukraine impenetrable internet access instantly for free. Elon Musk is a superstar. I mean, he really is. Zelensky asks the European Union for membership. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Not especially when you're fighting a war. There's no way the European Union will accept that membership. And people have been talking about possibly NATO expanding if they would accept Sweden and Finland. There's far too many, there's far too many countries in NATO as it is. You're not going to, especially now with what's going on in Europe, the applications for joining NATO are closed at this point. And you can talk about NATO. I know, there's been some discussions. I know, there was some talk that Trump wanted to leave NATO. I actually want to make another video talking about a lot of people wondering out there, why didn't Putin do anything during the Trump administration? And I have some theories on that. I think it's mainly because the Russian government views Trump as way more unpredictable. When you take a look at a guy like Biden, he's going to follow whatever NATO says. And in this situation, Russia saw a weakness where the Ukraine was not a part of NATO. If they invaded the Ukraine, if they invaded the Ukraine along with threatening nukes, there was really nothing that NATO could do. And you say, well, why didn't they do anything during Trump? I'll make another video on it explaining it. I think most of it is because, number one, the Russians were actually, I'm sure, very happy with Trump potentially leaving NATO. There are arguments to be made that the United States should not be in NATO. It's just based on the fact that the United States is so much more military advanced than every other single country that's in the agreement. The problem is you need to have allies in other countries and in other places, and NATO, this is why the Russians hate NATO. It's basically an impenetrable wall. Russia against Poland. Russia would win. The problem is if you invade Poland, you're facing the United States as well. And you're facing all the other European countries. That's why Russia hates NATO. And I think this move by Putin to invade Ukraine, and if he can get Ukraine, it is a strictly move to weaken NATO and potentially negotiate with NATO. If you want Ukraine back, you're going to have to weaken NATO. The United States is going to have to leave NATO, something like that. If you have Ukraine, you're basically holding a country hostage at that point. It's such an interesting strategy that I just thought of. Again, maybe Russia just wants Ukraine because they want the Soviet Union back, although there would be absurdly big hurdles in trying to do that, considering several countries that were a part of the former Soviet Union are now in NATO. So, this is the only logical thing I can think of. You take Ukraine, you use it as a bargaining chip to weaken NATO. I think the Russians' number one goal, if you are them and you want more power in Western Europe, you need to weaken NATO. You need the United States out of NATO. You need those countries to kind of lose this big alliance that they have going for them. And right now, NATO is really strong. And we'll have to see if that ends up working out for him, guys. We'll continue to update you. You can see the places again. It slowed down. My speculation is Putin, he wanted to lose as little troops as possible, so they went light on the invasion of actual ground troops. They bombed a bunch of places. They really struggled to, actually capture air superiority. Apparently, they have that now, at least according to a few tweets recently, and they are looking just to get the capital Kiev and install that puppet government into Ukraine, which at that point, in controlling at least the eastern part of Ukraine becomes extremely more easier. They're trying, as you guys can see, collapse right on in. You can see all the red is the areas they currently have successfully occupied in Ukraine. And it looks like this is just the exact same map where they're kind of where the main routes they're coming from. There you guys can see it right there. Chernobyl, we heard about that. They've successfully occupied that, it looks like, along with some other minor cities as they head towards Kiev. As you guys can see, the artillery barrage that's going on in Kiev. They want Kiev ASAP. That would enable them to install that puppet pro-Russian government and force the Ukrainians to move their government more to the west on the border of Poland. I'm sure they'll want to continue fighting, absolutely, just based on how the fight has been going. You guys can see all the different detailed views of the current invasion. This is happening in real time. It is crazy to see it on social media, things like that. Just wanted to give my opinion on what I thought Vladimir Putin's main goal was. And again, all these threats, these nuclear threats, it seems like there's a 99% chance these are bluffs, but, is saving the Ukraine worth that 1% chance of launching the Earth into World War III? That's a question they're all asking right now. The answer is no. Make sure you're following me on Twitter, ladies and gentlemen. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.